Hello, folks. Welcome back to the AA Big Book Stories. I'm your host, Jason. Today's video is sponsored by James 414 Vape Sales. That's James 414 Vape Sales. They're out of Mount Vernon, Kentucky, and they're real good people. If you happen to through there and needing vape juice or any vape accessories or want to buy mod or anything, they pretty much have it all. They have a Facebook website, and they also have a regular website on the internet. Today, we're on story number 7 of part 3 of the stories in the back of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. Today's story is called On the Move. Working the AA program showed this alcoholic how to get from geographics to gratitude. I thought my life had come to an end when I arrived at my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at 28 years old. I had been drinking since early teens, and to my way of thinking, booze had been the answer to my problems, not the problem itself. Even I had to admit, though, that my life had gotten pretty bad and my options were quickly running out. In a moment of desperation, I agreed to go to one AA meeting. It's easier to see now that I look back on my drinking days that from the very beginning alcohol has been a part of nearly every disaster in my life. As a young boy, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, I had begun to steal drinks when my parents were not looking, or my friends and I would convince someone from the local high school to buy us some beer. Slowly but steadily, my problems began to grow from there. It started with simple episodes at school. My buddies and I would split a six-pack over lunch and thought nobody would notice. It never occurred to me that a 13-year-old could not easily hide the effects of even a single beer. By the time I was 14 or 15, things were getting far more serious, and the consequences of my drinking were getting more costly in every way, socially, morally, financially. A turning point came when I was 15 and my mom was in the middle of an ugly divorce. Through nobody's fault but my own, I decided that I had an answer. In a drunken brawl, having planned every step of my actions, I attempted to kill my stepfather. I vaguely remember being dragged out of the house by the police and came to yet again trying to answer for what I had done while drunk. The results were that I eventually given a choice by the judge to go to juvenile hall until I was 25 years old or leave the state until at least 21. I did not want to go to juvenile hall, so I did the math and decided the better part of valor was to get as far away from there as I could. Over the next 13 years, until I graced the doors of AA for the first time, life really never got any better. I did, however, learn the fine art of geographics. From my home on the East Coast, I landed in Japan. Then I moved back to the United States and to New England, and then out to California, where over the next 6 years, I saw my alcoholism take me to new depths of disgrace, embarrassment, and despair. As one of my early AA sponsors used to say, I didn't hang out with lower companions, I became one. The Pacifics are pretty much the same as for most alcoholics. I went to places I swear I would never go. I did things I did not imagine myself doing. I hung out with people at one time I would cross the street to avoid. There came a time when looking into the mirrors, I honestly did not know just who was looking back at me. To say that I had arrived at the jumping off point is an understatement. Life could not go on like this much longer. I began the process of speeding up the day when my life would end. My doctor had 6 or 7 suicide attempts on my medical records. Most were pitiful efforts to reach out for help, although I didn't see it at the time. My last such attempt was very public and demonstrated that I had lost touch with reality and with any sense of what my actions could do to others. A friend took pity on me, I think, and invited me to his home for Thanksgiving. His parents were in town from the East Coast and were having a big party. There at the dinner table, I stood up and attempted suicide in front of everyone. The memory of that has always stuck in my mind as the definition of pitiful, mm, incomprehensible demoralization that the big book talks about. What is sadder is that my actions had made sense to me at the time. As a result of that episode, I ended up seeing a psych therapist and found out what was wrong with me. At our first session, she invited me to tell me about yourself. I proceeded to do so, only to be told to stop after I had only spoken for 5 minutes or so, and she explained that she really only had two things to say to me. That she thought I hadn't told the truth since I walked into the office and that I was an alcoholic. It took me a long time to understand how a description of my life could make anyone think I was drunk. The doctor said that if I was going to continue to see her, I had to agree to do two things. First, she gave me a business card with a phone number on it. She said the next time I tried to kill myself, I should call that number first. Second, she was going to give me a book to read, and she wanted me to read the first few hundred pages before our next meeting. Before I left that day, she gave me a copy of the big book. It took me some time, but I eventually made it to my first meeting. I had gone out on New Year's Eve. When I came to, I thought it was the next morning. As I held my head steadily, popped some aspirin, and tried to drink a cup of coffee, I glanced at the front page of the newspaper. It was January 9th. I had been on a blackout for over a week. Everything else had happened. Everything after everything else that had happened that was terrifying enough to get me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I drove up to that first meeting, though I saw the address I had was actually a church, as a nice Jewish boy, I was not about to wander into a church. I knew that I would not be welcome. I hid on the floorboards of my cars and peeked out of the window, waiting for the drunks to walk by. Everyone looked normal, so I figured I might be in the wrong place. I was about to leave when I saw a drinking buddy of mine go by. I jumped out of the car and greeted him. Funny thing, but it was his first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous also. What a coincidence. In we walked into a world that has turned everything in my life inside out. I didn't like AA and the people in it for a long time. I didn't trust anyone, and I got tired of sitting in the meetings listening to newcomers as they began to talk about finding God, having their families returned to them, being treated with respect by society, and finding some peace of mind. It never occurred to me that they had a sponsor and were working the 12 steps of recovery. I had what I now call a sponsor of the first month. I always had a sponsor, but whenever one of them would lovingly suggest I do something, I would fire them and move on to someone else. I remained angry and bitter and isolated, even though I was going to 5 or 6 AA meetings per week and was not drinking. After 7 months sober, I was getting a little bored with AA and began to wonder if it was all there was to life. The concept of not drinking again seemed a little extreme, and I thought that perhaps it would be different this time. Then something happened to me I now believed helped me stay sober and find my higher power. I woke up one morning and couldn't feel my legs. I could still walk with a little difficulty, but it got worse as time passed. Several months and lots of medical examinations, doctors, hospital visits, and tests later, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The path since has been quite a journey. I now either walk with crutches or use a wheelchair. There have been lots of times I wanted and intended to drink again during my second year of sobriety. I slowly became angrier and angrier. I was in what one of my sponsors now refer to as the angry years. I was one of those people we see and meet in meetings and wonder how they got sober. At my home group, members didn't give up on me, they loved me anyways. One day, the group's general service representative announced she was moving and would have to give up on her commitment, and they elected me to her job. They explained to me that a serious 2-year commitment was exactly what I needed. I tried to explain that I was not eligible, but they told me to go to the monthly general service business meeting and tell them about my problems with serving. Needless to say, they didn't allow me to quit either. Along the way, I learned in spite of myself that best thing about AA service jobs is that for a period of time I got out of myself. At some point I began to shut my mouth and actually listen to what other people were saying at meetings. After white knuckling it for almost 2 years in AA, I finally broke down and saw that I could not stay sober all by myself. But I was terrified of going back to drinking. After all my suicide attempts, I had no fear of dying, but I could not stand the idea that I would go back to living that way again. I, I was at what old timers and our literatures refer to as a jumping off point. I did not know what to do. One evening I did the unimaginable, at least for me, after picking up my sponsor of the month to go to a meeting. I informed him that I was ready to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. In most respects, my life had began that night. The man took me through the steps in a loving, gentle way that for uh, that for the remainder of my life I will be grateful for. He taught me to look inward to my soul and to welcome a higher power into my life and to reach out to others. He taught me how to look into the mirror and to even respect the man who was looking back at me. When I reached the ninth step, I began to hesitate in my enthusiasm. One morning I woke up covered in sweat and could not get over a nightmare I had, that this was my last day of sobriety. After calling friends and my sponsor, I knew what had to be done. I spent the entire day, more than 8 or 9 hours, going into people's office and making my amends. Some were thrilled to see me. One woman called the police. When they arrived, it turned out the policewoman was in AA and convinced the woman not to press charges. I even ran into someone I thought was dead, so I took a dead guy to lunch and made my amends to him also. For the first time, I thought and actually felt as if I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, with something to share at the meetings. When I was 4 years old, sober, I took a trip back to my home city, one of the very few times since I had left so many years before under the threat of jail time. I made my amends to the man I attempted to kill when I was 15 years old. I visited and made amends to several people who had sat at that Thanksgiving dinner table and watched me attempt suicide in front of them. I came home exhausted, but knew that I somehow done the right thing. It is probably no coincidence that the following year my old friend invited me back for Thanksgiving dinner. AA and the steps of recovery have shown me how to look at events in a different way. I can now understand how some things which once seemed major disasters turned out to be blessings. Certainly my alcoholism fits that category. I am truly a grateful alcoholic today. I do not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. Those events that once made me feel ashamed and disgraced now allow me to share with others how to become a useful member of the human race. My physical disability has not altered my attitude. If anything, it has enhanced it. Long ago I learned that no matter how uncomfortable I was physically, I felt better by getting out of myself and helping someone else. It has also helped me to learn how to laugh at myself and how not to take myself so seriously. I am aware that I am not the only person on earth with problems. Though my experiences in general service AA has shown me how widespread and diverse the program is, I have traveled throughout the United States and even went to Israel for several months with a few years ago. While there I attended meetings and was a secretary to a meeting located in a bomb shelter. Like everyone, I have my good days and bad days. Unlike my attitude while I was still drinking, however, I rarely dread what is going to happen to me today. I have even had a chance to see my father come into AA. We have been to numerous AA conventions together and have shared more with each other in the past few years than we ever had before. I think we are both at peace with our past and comfortable with our present. In the past several years, I have gone back to school and begun a new career. As I roll around in my wheelchair, I am amazed when I realize that I honestly can't imagine my life to be anything different than what it has been, and that it is just fine with me. The tools of sobriety and recovery in AA are there for me to use in all aspects of my life, and all I ever need is the willingness to do what is right in front of me. I am grateful that a drunk like me was fortunate enough to live until I arrived in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, folks, that's all for today. Until next time, one AA time, one AA place, and one AA channel.